Oh, okay. And we're it's a nice little prompt. Thank you. And we're recording, so I hope that's okay with everybody. What I guess is useful, it's nice if some people keep their cameras on, but don't feel that you have to, but it would be great if you could mute yourself when you're not asking questions. And if you do put questions in the chat, we'll invite you to ask them in person if you wish to. If not, we can do that for you. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker. I might pronounce this wrong, so apologies, Maria. It's Maria Reraki. Is a lecturer in language, literacies and dyslexia in the School of Education. So thank you, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'll share my screen now, if that's okay. Yeah, can you all see that? Yeah. So yes, yeah, I'm Maria Reraki. I work at the Department of Disability Inclusion and Special Needs at the School of Education, and as part of the talk today, actually my presentation will focus on one particular event that relates to the theme of today's event on engaging public audiences with research. So the event that I organized back in November was part of the ESRC Festival of Social Science. And as my area of expertise is dyslexia, the topic that we discussed was dyslexia, but because of the theme of the ESRC Festival was our changing world, I wanted to create an event that would discuss what's new in the field from both research and teaching perspectives. So today's presentation will focus on, it will be structured in before, what I did before the event, during the event and after the event, so as to show you really the reasons why I decided to do that, the processes and the steps that I followed to organize that event, and what I think I got out of it as an academic. So, for example, the before stage, I'll discuss why, what were the incentives that I had to do that, the steps I followed to make that event happen, and what happened during the event, and the outcomes, what I got out of it. So the before stage, I remember I read this paper a while ago that academics could change the world if they would stop sharing their research only with their peers. And so my motivation, my incentives to do this to engage publicly, to engage the public with my research and other people's research in the field of dyslexia was to listen to and share with the public what's been happening in the world of dyslexia. So I was asking questions. So before I got that proposal to the ESRC Festival, who do I share it with? How can I share it? And why should I do that? So we always want to contribute to knowledge as academics, and we do that with presentations and conferences and other events, or with the papers that we produce, or with research. But I think one of the ways we can engage audiences is with events as such, as the one organized by the ESRC. So I wanted to contribute to knowledge with reaching and engaging researchers and practitioners in the field. So I wanted to bring together both these perspectives of dyslexia in that event. In the School of Education and broadly, we use a lot the terms research informed teaching and teaching informed research. You can't really teach without being research informed, and you get so many ideas from the teaching that you do with your students. I think those two, this is a two-way relationship. So I wanted to share that. And as I said before, engaging audiences beyond our colleagues, beyond our peers, beyond other academics and the students that we teach was one of my aims, another one of my aims. And of course, with these events, as we all know, the creation of new networks and people that are actually new to the field and have a lot to contribute. So I wrote down the aim. So why would I do that and how would I do that? So bringing together research and practice of dyslexia, bring together speakers that are, in my view, lead researchers and practitioners in the field so that they would communicate those recent developments in the field, but also researchers that have contrasting views of the topic. That will be the theme of the event. So as you know, some of you know, dyslexia is a very complicated field. There are people that, for example, say that the term shouldn't be used. There are people who say the term should be used. There are different perspectives there. Different disciplines and sub-disciplines have examined dyslexia. So I wanted, as much as I could, in 1 hour that the event would last, to bring those views together and making it engaging and interesting. They make the event engaging and interesting. And of course, I wanted to make it popular. It was an online. It would be an online event. So I wrote that down as a name. So I would later revisit all those aims to see if actually I met them. So the preparation stage, in consultation with the Festival of Social Sciences team, I had several ideas about what would be the topic and also the title of the event. So I think it's important to speak to the experts. The festival team, they know what will be a catchy title. They know what people would like to talk about. For example, I did mention at the start that perhaps I would do something COVID related with special needs, but then they, for example, they knew that this is overloaded already, so maybe not do that. And I think they were right. Then I had to decide on the speakers. So the networks I already had was something quite helpful, and because the wider the networks, the more people you're able to reach. So I decided based on the aims that I had set for that event, so what I wanted to achieve with that event, I selected those speakers that will be the presenters. The number of the presenters will have to be around 3, but I contacted more than 3 just in case one or more would say no or wouldn't be available. I was lucky enough to get all the 3 of them that I contacted, and they were my first choices. So after I had the number of the presenters and the confirmation from the ones I contacted, I decided on the structure of the events. That was the most difficult part because I wanted to see, I want to decide the order of the presentation, how to make it interesting, and how would it be engaging. It would be an online event, so taking into consideration all those factors was quite important. So the next step was to advertise the events. Again, working closely with the festival team was quite important because they suggested ways of engaging wider communities and networks. I used my own networks from a research and practical perspectives, such as school, colleges, universities, and other colleagues in the field. I asked for my colleagues and to contact their networks and the speakers of the event. I realized the strength, one more time, I realized the strength of the power the social media have. I used Twitter, Facebook a lot, the University of Birmingham web pages. Again, the festival team also did a lot of work there. I used an e-card in all the emails I was sending so people would know about that. We started advertising more aggressively, let's say, 2 months before the event, because once everything was decided, it was at start, like 2 months before, the numbers were quite low, but that's when we kicked in and we started communicating that to different audiences and different communities. However, because it's 2 months, within 2 months, many things can change. It's important that we updated all the information and the order of the speakers, for example, and also setting reminders for the people that had registered in the event. We also, what I decided was that I wanted this to be an audience-led event. So the people that would be registered, they would send us questions if they had any. So 1 month before the event, we did gather up all those questions, group them, and send them to the presenters so that their presentations would be based on those questions. And I think that engaged people even before actually the event took place. So I think that was an innovative idea, and it raised the interest of people that wanted to ask questions about dyslexia to the experts that would be involved in that event. So it was the first time that I would do an online event. I would organize an online event. So there are practicalities that I needed to consider to make it successful, because this is what I wanted to achieve. So, for example, practicing using Zoom, rehearsing how things will run more than once, checking sound and image quality. Excuse me. Sorry. Having a colleague as a backup. For example, if something would happen, if I wasn't well, or if I had COVID, which I have now, or you know, having someone that would act in your place if something would happen was also making me feel a bit better about organizing the whole thing, because you are the only person responsible for it. But I think other people need to know about how things will run when you're not there. Working closely with the conferences and events team helped. Having another computer in hand in case something happened. Agreeing with the speakers, the order of the presentations, the length of the presentations was important so that they wouldn't overrun. Keeping the speakers updated on numbers and on the audience questions, and actually making them feel part of that event. They would form actually a big part of the event, so they needed to be updated. And making a list of what can go wrong was actually quite important, because it helped me predict and be proactive actually if something of those things in my list would go wrong, what I would do. And of course, getting consent, because with online events, especially those that are recorded, it's important for people that will be presenting what that means to them. So the during stage, as expected and practiced, yes. So this is what it was. Most of it happened as we had as planned. However, the order of the speakers changed very last minute because something happened to one of the speakers. This is something, you know, not unexpected, but not something that doesn't happen. My microphone, for example, stopped working in the headset I was using. And also the event was overrun. At the end, the presentations lasted longer than expected and suggested. So it was at least 20 minutes more than an hour. Looking back, excuse me. Looking back, I would say that the order of the presentations using Zoom, the questions from the audience worked well, and the contrasting views of the topic is something that also I would definitely do again if I organize a similar event or something else like that. I think it brought together people having those contrasting ideas. It was the questions and the discussions were so interesting in the chat, and I think people and even myself would like more time to do those. What I would do differently, I would definitely try to be less stressed. I was quite stressed, I think, because of the mode of the event. So I was a bit dazzled when I had to share screen and enable people to share screens during that event. The timings of the presentation, some people had to leave at 8 o'clock, for example, when we had told them the event would finish. And I think they felt that they were missing out, for example, or they missed out some things. And the consent, some of the speakers, for example, they weren't feeling very comfortable signing the consent forms after the event. So this is something to agree from the start in a different way. The after stage. So the after stage, we did inform the speakers and the people who took who were part of the audience at the event where where they could find that on the ESRC Festival web pages, and that we would let them know when the video would be available. It's important to keep advertised events. And for example, is something that you organize, that I organized. I still put the link to the video on the YouTube channel from the University of Birmingham. I'll even use it for marketing purposes for the dyslexia course that I lead. I did manage to extend my network as an academic. I am currently working with other people that I've met after speaking to them after the event for a new research project. And personally and professionally, I have an increased motivation to do some writing, to do more research, to organize more events as such, and to make those connections with more researchers in the field. So I think this is where I would say the event benefited me professionally as an academic. Thank you very much. And excuse for all the coughing, but I have COVID, so sorry about that.
Thank you very much, Maria, and I hope your symptoms aren't too bad and you get well soon. And thank you for joining still and giving us your talk. You did mention having a backup in case you got COVID. You don't need one, but
yeah, I did that presentation last night, and this morning I tested positive, and you know.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining. We're going to do questions at the end. I hope that's okay with everybody. Feel free to pop them in the chat. I've got a couple for you already, Maria, but I'll hold them. Don't worry. So feel free to use the chat. So the next speaker is Scott Taylor, who's an associate professor and business school director of external engagement and responsible business. Great to have you here, Scott. Over to you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Darren, and thank you, Lauren, also for the work that's gone into this. I have some beautiful slides prepared, but I'm not going to share them with you because they will cause my laptop to crash. But Lauren has seen the slides. They have photographs on them. They're interesting, but you're just going to have to imagine them.
Would you like to share them, Scott?
It's probably best not to, Lauren, because it might be a problem with the actual PowerPoint thing. So if you're okay with that, I think I'll just talk through in about 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to talk a little bit from the perspective of a contributor to events like this. So not so much an organizer, as Maria was talking about there, but from the point of view of the person turning up to participate in the event. So I was trained in a qualitative research tradition that emphasizes two key movements: the importance of getting off campus to collect data, and then also the importance of maintaining communication with respondents after we collect the data from them. And so the first movement, as you all know, I think, is quite straightforward. It's the foundation of ethnographic research, developed in anthropology and then spreading out across all social science disciplines. The second movement of maintaining contact with our respondents, with the people we collect data from, is a little bit more unusual, I think, and potentially more of a risk, because when we leave the field, we have the freedom to leave the field and come back to our nice, safe campus. But when we invite people onto campus, and when we invite the people that we collected data from into our analysis and presentation process, then it starts to get a little bit more risky. I think these people could say or do anything, and including challenging what we're saying about them and their organizations. So if we don't take these risks, though, I think university life has the potential to become really quite dull and detached and disenchanted in the way that it has been for many of us over the last couple of years. But there's a series of practical problems, and I think organizing and participating in events like these brings these practical problems to a really sharp focus. First of all, there's the issue of doors and boundaries. So I do research in workplaces, and that always involves physically negotiating access to the workplaces. I have to find and persuade gatekeepers to let me in. and that the research that I'm going to do is going to be interesting for them. This has become more and more difficult over the course of my working life, about 2 decades. I don't know why. Some colleagues suggest that there's too many people doing research. Others suggest that research is more associated with online activity rather than physical data collection. And lots of other people, myself included, argue that workplaces and organizations have become more secretive and more reluctant to open their doors to strangers or outsiders. In the other direction, I think respondents have it's become more difficult to persuade people to come to campus as well, to listen to the results of our research. And I think this is mostly an issue of language and translation. So certainly research in my field, organizational behavior, has become more obscure and more abstruse and more focused on making a grand theoretical contribution rather than communicating back to the people who matter in the process. So the research is less accessible and less comprehensible and less meaningful to the people that it should be the most meaningful for. So in terms of the business school, I think on campus, we probably have a reputation for being a school of practice. We're certainly very practice focused and practice oriented. And we tend to be involved in the Festival of Social Science in a range of different ways. So last year in 2021, the year that didn't really happen, I was involved in two FOSS events. The first one was a collaboration with Will Leggett in the Department of Sociology. And Will's just also become head of department. So this was an amazing achievement for him to run an event at the same time as doing that. And this was an online panel discussion of mindfulness. There was a very strong institutional flavor to this event. We invited a speaker from HSBC, for example, who obviously represented his organization, his employer, his profession, which turned out to be international finance. He had the most amazing job title. He's the head of global transformation, which is a job title that we all want, I think, at the moment. And there were people attending who have been very active in local and national politics. What we wanted to do was to talk about mindfulness, but to avoid the sense that mindfulness is an obviously good intervention in organizational life. And we tried very hard to set that up with the speakers. We wanted to talk respectfully about mindfulness, but we also wanted to be able to encourage critical reflection on the practice of mindfulness. And our speakers did a great job in that. And then also, somewhat to our surprise, the audience did a fantastic job. So the audience questions took us in a very critical direction, which was great fun, including one audience member who asked whether mindfulness encouraged you to question your own professional activity. In other words, to resign and go and do something more worthwhile and meaningful than international finance or politics. Now, this was a purely online event, but it still felt like we'd invited these people into our house, onto campus. That was interesting. The second part of that, I think, on reflection is that even though we were all disembodied, Will had the fantastic idea of starting the event with a 2-minute mindfulness practice, which was led by Rachel Lilly from the Birmingham Leadership Institute. And I had never practiced mindfulness. I've never wanted to practice mindfulness, but it was really good. It provided a leveling at the beginning of the event. We all had to practice what we were going to talk about. So very briefly, the second event was different in just about every way. It was organized by a recent sociology PhD from Birmingham, Julie Whiteman, Dr. Julie Whiteman, who now is a lecturer in marketing in the business school. And it involved a panel of academics from across COSS and CAL. And the topic was gender and identity. The target audience was absolutely anyone. And it took place at the MAC. In the city centre, so completely embodied, if you like, as an event. So there were around about 40 or so people there. All of those people lived within walking distance or a short drive. Unlike the event on mindfulness, where we had participants from London, from Western Europe, from all sorts of different places. And each panel member spoke and then ran a round table for discussion, and then Julie drew it all together at the end. The main thing I remember about this event is that it was, we were all asked to bring an object which said something about our gender and identity. So this sort of puts you, as an academic, it puts you out into the event as a participant, which I thought was very clever of Julie. Again, providing a level field for everyone to start from at the event. It made us all equal and encouraged us all to think that we were all taking a risk, which we were, a literal risk at that time in November as well. And then finally, I think in very practical terms across the two events, as Will Liggett kept saying, there's this enormous FOSS machine on campus with all these people who are very good at their jobs and very happy to help. So I think as an organizer and as a contributor, it's very important that we collaborate best we can with them. Intrinsically interesting subjects. I think Maria and Kayleigh are talking about this as well, where our research is clearly important, but if we can translate our research into something which is even more interesting as a topic for an event, then we're doing quite well. And then, as you've gathered, both of the organizers that I worked with, both Will and Julie, did a fantastic job. So that was the two things that I wanted to talk through, Darren. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. I think in some ways it's quite brave to not have the slides. I appreciate it was because you didn't want to crash, but they're easy to kind of hide behind, aren't they? Or they can be. But I think there's two ways of doing it. I think sometimes they're really useful, but sometimes it's really nice to see somebody just kind of talk to the screen and provide that perspective, just as if we're having a conversation. I felt like I was just sat across the table from you, not in a kind of Zoom room. So that's really exciting.
Well, it took me ages to prepare the slides, Darren.
I'm sure, and what I was going to go on to say is I'm sure we can circulate them and people can see those wonderful photos and have their own laptop crash at their own convenience. So thank you very much, Scott. And again, I've made a few notes there of really interesting perspective, especially that idea of leveling and about being a participant. I think that's in some ways a really potentially quite profound way of thinking about how as people that work in institutions, as academic institutions, but also as academics, is how we can think of ourselves as a citizen and kind of do that kind of work as well. Brilliant, thank you very much. And it's gone on to full screen view, so I can't see my notes. And finally, we've got Kayleigh Garthwaite, who's the Associate Professor and Deputy Director of Research Impact in the School of Social Policy. So thank you very much, Kayleigh.
Thanks, Darren. And I'm going to hide behind some slides. No, but actually a lot of the slides are images that I want to share with you from our COVID Reality zine, which I'm going to talk to you about today. So yeah, thanks so much for organising this event and for inviting me along. And hopefully I'll follow on quite nicely from what Maria and Scott have been talking about. And as you were talking, Scott, it really made me think about how with this project that I'm going to tell you about, we've done like absolutely everything online, which as you can imagine, as I start telling you about the project, we've worked with families on a low income across the UK. So already you can see there could be issues in terms of digital exclusion and how we've done that. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you all about what we've done as quickly as possible. And then, yeah, looking forward to hearing people's questions. So yeah, what I want to talk to you about today is the COVID Realities research programme that we actually just launched yesterday. We launched our final report and our launch webinar. And just to say, all the images you can see here have been made sort of by the web designer, Tom, that we've been working with and in conjunction with participants. So and just to flag, we've been funded by Nuffield Foundation and it's a collaboration between Universities of York and Birmingham. But the zines that I'm going to talk about today were funded by the Impact Acceleration account at UOB. So I'm really thankful for that support because we wouldn't have been able to do this otherwise. So what is COVID Realities then? So COVID Realities research program came about sort of not last March, I'm doing forgetting that 2021 was a year, March 2020. Nuffield Foundation put out a rapid response call for research around the social impacts of COVID-19. So at that point, none of us knew at all what the impacts would be, but what we did know is that we expected at least that COVID would have a negative impact upon people who were already being most affected by issues of poverty and life on a low income. So Ruth Patrick, who's the PI and based at University of York, and Maddie Powers at York and myself at Birmingham put together a research programme working in partnership with the Child Poverty Action Group. And also, importantly, we wanted to work with parents and carers themselves across the UK who were living on a low income. So we have, we've just coming to the end of this two-year now research programme that has all been all virtual, and it's been a participatory online research project. So myself and Ruth and Maddie had experience of doing participatory research before. My own background is very much qualitative ethnographic work, but none of us had actually done participatory research online. So it was very much a case of learning on the job, making mistakes, being really reflective and reactive on what we were doing and the decisions we were making. But I think really importantly from the outset, we knew that we wanted the project to be, as is the case with participatory research, obviously, very much shaped by what the parents and carers we were working with wanted to see, and how they wanted the project to go. So we've very much been at every stage of the research being led by them. And the zines that I'm going to tell you about in a moment were something that the participants themselves wanted to do in terms of arts-based outputs. So basically, the criteria for getting involved in COVID Realities was that people had to be living on a low income, which they defined themselves. If they decided they were living on a low income, they could become involved, and they had to have dependent children under the age of 19. And so we've been working then with over 100 parents and carers who have shared their experiences of COVID and social security through online diaries. And for the online diaries, we worked with, like I say, with Tom Flannery, who's a web designer. And again, we worked with a small group of pilot participants who helped to shape what that online diary would look like. Participants responded to what we call big questions of the week, where myself, the members of the research team, and also gradually participants would record a short 30-40 second question that people could then respond to for the diaries. So that tended to be something that was topical at the time. And we also got organisations such as DWP, Trussell Trust, Independent Food Aid Network to pose questions as well. Participants took part in monthly discussions at virtual big ideas groups, we called them. So we'll come together once a month, Monday nights on Zoom for an hour and a half. And the focus there was very much how we can turn all of the really rich data that we've got from the diaries and the big questions of the week. How can we really turn that into focused policy recommendations? And then finally, arts-based outputs, which weren't part of the initial bid to Nuffield. So we, like I say, got further support for the zines from the IAA account here. And we also did some audio clips of participants having conversations with one another. And I'll share all the links with you as well after this, because it's all on our website. So a key part of what we wanted to do was engaging with the wider research community, with policymakers, but also communicating messages to the public. So what is a zine then? Some of you might think, what is she talking about? What is a zine? And I think initially some of the participants weren't sure what a zine was. Both myself and Ruth had worked with a zine artist who's called Jean McEwen. We'd worked with her before on various projects. So, we suggested this could be one way that participants might like to go about turning their experiences and what they've told us in the diaries into easily communicatable messages. So what you can see here in front of you is the zine packs that Jean put together and then sent out to participants. And so participants took part in three zine making workshops that were all virtual. So initially, Jean, I'll just show that again, Jean would send out this pack in advance. So it's got, you know, stencils, Pritt sticks, scissors. Tom brought together some of the graphics that you can see. Some of them are very much created from the COVID realities diaries, inspired by that. There would be different words that people could use. And the idea is that we came together on Zoom, worked together across 3 workshops to create some images that we then have produced a final zine that's in print format, but it's also on our website, and I'll share more details of how we've actually disseminated that in a moment. So I'll not go through this in too much detail because I'll share the slides afterwards, but just to go through a little bit more about what a zine is. Like I've said, it's a sort of collage of words, images, stencils. And the idea is that it's an alternative way of actually getting across messages. And zines have been tend to used in sort of co-production spaces. And as I say here, sort of historically, they've been used as a sort of voice for marginalized individuals and groups, as a way of sort of advocating for social change. And like I say, it was really important that we gave participants, you know, some ideas of how they might want to share their experiences, and a zine came out as a really popular way of doing that. So we worked together across the zine workshops, and at each stage when we put together the zines, we shared them back with participants to see everybody was happy with it. And that was, you know, very much, like I say, very much every stage of the process, we made sure we were being led by the parents and carers we worked with. And so in terms of the disseminating the zine, again, very much led by how parents and carers wanted to do that. So so far we've had a launch for the zine at the Bradford Zine Fair, which takes place every year in Bradford Library. We've also disseminated electronic versions of the zine in a lot of different spaces. So print versions have been put in cafes, advice centres like CAB, they've been in libraries, and also we've disseminated them to sort of public policy making, but also media audiences. So what I wanted to do, I've just got a few slides where I'll show you some of the images from the zine so you can see just how powerful and effective they are. And I've got some a quote as well about actually what the zine making process was like. So just to say, I'm like the most uncreative person ever. So when I did the first zine workshop, I went into the breakout group, I looked at what others were doing, but I didn't actually have a go at it myself because I was like, oh, I'm just, yeah. So I didn't make one myself about my COVID reality. So the theme was, you know, do a zine based on your COVID reality. So I have to say I was just a sort of interloper in those sessions. But as you can see, you know, just really, really powerful way of getting across messages in a visual way, and just in a, you know, in an alternative way to how we would normally communicate messages, perhaps. And so as you can see, this image on the right, Build Back Fairer, was created by one of our participants, Kat, who we actually then, like, Kat was somebody who was, you know, she was doing sort of design, and she liked to do graphic design things, but she'd sort of not done it in a sort of a career way. But we actually commissioned her from COVID Realities to do some of the images for our website, some of the images for the final report and the book that we've got coming out later on. So very much, again, working in conjunction with participants. Sorry, I'm not even sure how long I've been talking, but I see it's 22, so I'm just gonna just want to briefly talk about what impact the zines had. So like I say, we've shared it, both the physical copies and all the online copies as well. But it's been really good to hear about actually how the zine has been shared sort of beyond that. So from the participants we've been working with, they've shared it with some of the schools and where the children go. So it's been used in several educational settings. And it's also been used by a housing organisation in Belfast who actually want to do their own workshops and develop their own zine. So it's in those ways, it's sort of encouraged other people to explore zine making as a way of communicating key messages. We're also invited to submit a paper on the zine to a special issue of Sociological Research Online. And they're doing a new, what they call Beyond the Text special issues, which is sort of focusing on you know, different ways of expressing research findings. So we wrote that article with participants themselves, with Jean, who was a zine artist, and some of the researchers. So I just want to end, you can read this out for yourself, but basically the zine, we found that the zine making process was something that participants really enjoyed engaging with. Victoria here says, you know, she found cathartic pleasure in making the zines. And I think what we found that people, it felt like it brought them together, so they weren't alone in experiencing all the things that they were, you know, experiencing as life on a low income and being impacted by COVID. It was a way people could come together, find solidarity and express that as a group. So I just wanted to leave, those are everybody who's contributed to the zine, and you'll see some people, also some people's children made zines as well, so they're all included in the final printed zine, final online zine that I'll share the link with you in a moment. But yeah, thanks to all the people we worked with on the zine. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and yeah, looking forward to to seeing what questions there might be about zine making as a process.
Thank you very much, Kayleigh. Wonderful slides, I must say. really,
Thank you.
really good. And I mean, I saw a little bit of this. Lauren sent me the link a few weeks ago regarding something else, and I was quite touched by some of the. You only showed a few of the images there. I was quite touched by some of them, so it's quite a powerful way of doing things. Now, I don't think there's many questions in the chat, Lauren. Is there? I don't know if you should shake your head. No. So feel free to just kind of put your hand up, do electronically or not, or you know, could give us an actual wave. If not, I've got a couple of questions I can kick us off with while everybody else thinks of questions. So firstly, thank you to the three speakers. They're very different, but all very engaging talks, which is